Hey everyone, Curse Deck Builder here, making our way to 10,000 decks assisted, and here we are with Brion Stoutarm, a classic sacrifice deck in white and red that I'm very much so a big fan of. And this deck comes to us from Earth, Weeb, and Fire, which is a fantastic name if you ask me. And they say they're looking for reanimation, protection, and making it so the deck doesn't fall apart if my commander gets hated out of the game. And then they said for their restrictions, no universes beyond exclusive cards or tutors, which we can definitely work with. Now this deck is in a very interesting place, so we're going to have a bunch of suggestions, but I will try to fill out some of those things you've asked. So before we get there, this is a great reminder that if you would like to send me your own deck, there is a link down in the video description that you can do so. And if you want to like, comment, subscribe, I would be very grateful. We do a lot of decks here, and I'm just in the process of still setting up my new build of my computer and a few other fun things that you can look forward to. So subscribe, come by, leave terrible comments. I'm very excited for it. So let's get going. Brion Stoutarm is a 4-mana white-red giant warrior, 4/4 lifelink. And the main reason we use them is for a red and tapping them, we sacrifice another creature, and then Brion Stoutarm deals damage equal to the sacrificed creature's power to target player. So this is a fancy repeatable fling. Fling being sacrifice a creature and deal that much damage to a target. But there are some differences. The first difference, of course, is that it's repeatable. The second difference, of course, that with lifelink, you will always be gaining the life of the creatures, gaining life from the creatures that you smash with. And finally, and I think really importantly, is that you can only target players with this ability. You cannot use it as creature removal. Now, I think you can still send it at planeswalkers because of how the rule originally was, but I could be wrong about that. I don't know if the rules have kind of changed that. Target player or planeswalker. Yeah, so we can still knock out planeswalkers with this ability. Though granted, the whole point of this is to throw them at players. Now, I do particularly like this deck, as I mentioned before, like this deck archetype. I think Brion Stoutarm is really interesting, and there's a lot of different ways to build him. I think Giant Tribal has gotten really popular as a build version because there's been a lot of giant support that works very well with Brion, but I think whether it be just value, destruction, reanimation, cheating things into play, there's a lot of angles to go on. And this deck seems to be trying to hit some of these angles, and we're going to try to find out which part of these angles work and which don't. Looking at the deck, there's a YouTube link that I think explains the name, as this is a fighting game reference. I do play some fighting games, but not enough and not at a level that I really do get the reference, but I'm sure it is fantastic. Though the video does have a very fun throwing move, which I think is the whole idea here. Now, let's start with the curve, and I think this is where we're going to be attacking the deck the most. The curve is kind of really tough here. Not only do we go for a really long time, do we have quite a few high mana spells, we also have a very large amount of 4-mana spells. As viewers of this channel know, I kind of don't like this because our commander is 4 mana, which means almost all of these spells to a certain extent are contending with our commander. And some of them are worthwhile and some of them are not worthwhile. So we're going to go through a few of them to kind of get an idea of which ones we want to keep. And generally the idea is if we can go up or down 1 mana cost on these spells, we're generally going to be really happy, just because it's just not the same cost as Brion. And Brion is integral to the deck. We're going to try to reduce that stress with, 2 additional fling effects and 1 repeatable fling effect, but it is really important to note that it is very important that our commander gets out there. But of course, besides that, we do have a pretty high amount of high mana cards. It is very interesting to me that our creature curve goes from 1 to 3 immediately, and then quickly to 4 to 5 to 6 to 7 and to 10. So we're going to try to make some cuts there for sure. And then there's a few choices here and there that I'm going to kind of pick on a little bit so that we can kind of be critical. And to make up for it, I do have a large selection of additions. But before anything else, I think the best place to start is our lands. We have 32 lands, and that is really, really low for a deck like this, especially a deck that seeks to have 7 mana spells. Now, our 10 mana spells, I could assume we're looking to sneak attack, we're looking to death render, we're looking to Feldon of the Third Path them into the game. But to be honest, they're still in there, and they're still kind of tough to get out. So 32 lands is really, really low. I think I would feel a lot better. We're going to reduce the curve a lot, but even then, I think I'd feel a lot better if we would cut this, we would add to this, make it at least 36, 37, I think. We have ramp, but we don't have enough meaningful ramp that I think we can forego that amount of lands. If you're feeling spicy, you could go to 36 and leave it there, but I'm going to be honest, I think the odds of getting our lands to work on our side are low. It's funny because when I scroll down here, the sample hand has 4 lands in it, but I don't know what are the odds to be getting, enough lands constantly. That's 4 lands, I will say. But yeah, I imagine 2 land hands, another 4 land. Well, I mean, odds are, but I think we do definitely need more lands. I don't know. I never know how to feel about these randomizers because I am a little suspicious as a player of them sometimes. But I do know 32 lands is too little. We definitely want to go higher. So I think the best way to do this is I'm going to run through the cards generally, and I'm going to pick on the cards that I think we need to be a little critical of. And I'm going to go in reverse mana order, at least for the creatures, because that is where I want to start. So Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger and Desolation Twin are 2 very, very big Eldrazi spells. They are both 10/10s. They are both really, really good to fling. Now, mainly, I do like the Desolation Twin more, but mainly because that it comes with 2 10/10s. But there's something really important to note here. I'm not going to forget the fact that we have Death Render, we have Sneak Attack, and we have Feldon to cheat these creatures in. But both Eldrazi, being Eldrazi, have cast abilities. They do not have ETB abilities. So though I particularly like the large amount of power they come in, we're not even using them to their full potential. Desolation Twin, of course, being the biggest outlier here, because the main reason to play Desolation Twin is to get that twin. And unless you cast Desolation Twin, you will not get that second 10/10. So unless we wanted to go really, really devoted into ramp and we really, really wanted to go into Eldrazi, I think they are the first and easiest cuts of all. Moving forward, we got Realm Cloak Giant. I see this as a 5 mana spell because we're mainly casting it as cast off. I think that's fine. It's great. It's on theme. This is perfect. Elesh Norn, however, I have a bit of a problem with. And there's 2 reasons for it. The first reason for it is that Elesh Norn in a lot of my decks is a finisher. She is not like a value creature. She's a finisher in the way that she has an incredibly powerful -2/-2, and then the +2/+2 is very, very strong. Now, the first thing I want to point out is I think you have a better finisher, and that better finisher is Insurrection. I really, really like Insurrection in this deck, and I'll come back to it briefly, but I do think this is stronger. But talking more about Elesh Norn, I think something that's really worth considering is the fact that +2/+2 is not that meaningful in a Fling deck, right? In a Fling deck, we want to be, there's a reason Kiki-Jiki is stronger, right? We're doubling creatures that are like 12/12s. We want to be adding, we want to be adding tremendous amounts of power because it is more about power on singular creatures than creating an army of creatures to gain a lot of value out of that +2/+2. Likewise, the +2/+2, of course, is going on our commander, who will not benefit from it anyways. So there's a lot of creatures that are utility here, like even Feldon of the Third Path or Kiki-Jiki, that just do not care about +2/+2. So in the effort to reduce the curve, I am also, as much as it pains me to do it, going to suggest cutting Elesh Norn. Wormcoil Engine is fine. I still don't particularly like it here. This is just kind of a bruiser of a creature, and a lot of the value of this creature is falling apart when we sacrifice it. And the reason is, you might be like, well, Cursed, it has a return from the graveyard function. Don't we want to sacrifice it? Well, the thing with Wormcoil Engine, the actual power of the card is mainly the Death Touch lifelink aspect, that you get to throw the Wormcoil Engine at players, at blockers, you know, and not only do you get to guarantee destroying creatures with it, you gain a bunch of life, and then you get two very valuable creatures out of it. Namely, a 3/3 Death Touch is the most valuable part of it. However, both of this is just kind of like not as like we lose these abilities with Brion. First of all, the fact that the lifelink is here is meaningless because that's not how Fling works, and our commander already does that ability, already removes this lifelink from the creature. But the Death Touch completely gets ignored because, once again, it is Brion doing the damage and only to a player. So Wormcoil Engine is just a 6/6 that creates 2 tokens when it dies, and I think we can do a lot better than that. There's a lot of creatures that, if we wanted, that can break apart into smaller creatures at more reasonable rates, and this is just definitely not one of them. So Wormcoil Engine, easy cut. Whereas Sun Titan, I think, does this ability a lot better. And by, you play it, you reanimate something. And the thing is, you have actual incentive to keep Sun Titan around, right? Instead of immediately flinging the Sun Titan, you can, if you have your haste enablers, which you have a few of, you can immediately attack with it to get another trigger. Or you can play it slow and have Brion just sacrificing the trigger, the creatures it reanimates, to which I will have additions that I think are really, really rather important to use with cards like Sun Titan. So I really like Sun Titan here. I think this is an easy inclusion. On the other hand, Inferno Titan, I don't like as much, because this is a creature you don't want to fling. This is a creature, yeah, you can pump it with its fire-breathing ability, but even then, you want it to stay on the battlefield and get as many Titan triggers as you possibly can. So this just doesn't feel like the deck for this card, and for that easy cut as well. And we have just so many 6 drops, so many 5 mana drops. So I'm going to try to convince you to cut a lot of it. So Etali Primal Storm is another one I'd like to cut, because if this was an ETB creature, I would definitely keep it around. But Etali gains in power the longer it's on the battlefield and the more attacks it gets. So once again, I just don't think it belongs in this sacrifice deck. If you can find, and there are quite a few, an ETB with a similar ability, we can't use the other Etali because it's green-red, whereas we're in white-red. However, there are other versions of this creature that we can use for similar abilities. Not as good, but still good. And we should use them as ETB triggers. We should not be using them as attack triggers, because we're just not going to be able to take advantage of it. Now, don't get me wrong. Once again, this ability is very good with Felden of the Third Path, but that is a 1-for-1 combo here, right? Even with Sneak Attack, we only get one real use of it. We want multiple uses of it. So that is a cut for sure. Whereas on the other side, Conquering Manticore is a card I really, really like here. I think the strength here is very, very visible, because you summon it, you immediately steal a creature, you get to fling that, you get attack with that creature, you get to fling that creature, you're ahead quite a bit. And then from that point on, especially if you have haste, but even if you don't, you have a 5/5 flyer to go swinging. And as soon as Conquering Manticore outlives its purpose, you fling the Manticore. I think that's really, really strong, and I think for sure this should be one of your main 6 drops. I think the power level is quite high, and I do really, really like it. So this is definitely one I want you to be keeping. Moving further down, Zealous Conscripts I love for the exact same reasons I love the Manticore. I think these cards are some of the strongest. To steal your opponent's creatures and sacrifice them is inherently powerful. Now, sometimes you're going to steal creatures that aren't particularly good in terms of power, but you do need to get rid of them. So you're not always going to get tons and tons of damage out of these cards, but you're definitely going to get utility out of them, and I do particularly like that. That's not even counting times when you can steal your opponent's creatures that want to that have death triggers and take advantage of them yourself. So Zealous Conscripts, very, very good. All right, so Sunscourge Regent, it's just not on theme. It is a dragon that gets bigger. And in fact, I'm going to point out here Tauren Mauler as well. I get the idea of both of these cards, but I don't like them. And I like Tauren Mauler a bit more because it's 3 mana, and that'll go along with some cards I'm going to suggest. But Sunscorched Regent is it's just so much work, right? I just want you to think about this. You have to drop a 5-drop. Then you have to not fling it. I know this is silly, but it's like the whole point of your deck. It's like building an attack deck and you have creatures that you have to wait to attack with. The entire purpose of your deck is to get creatures and fling them at your opponent. But this is a creature that you don't want to fling yet. You want to hold on to it as long as possible. Then let's look at it this way. If we are assuming our opponents are going to cast, let's say, a total of 4 spells, so 1 spell each and one player casts 2 spells, 4 spells a turn cycle. Sunscorched Regent grows 4 per turn. So first turn it's 4, second turn it's 8, next turn it's 12. Is this worth it? I don't know. I really don't think so. I think it takes a lot of time. I think the idea of attacking with it is really, really nice. But if Sunscorched Regent starts becoming a problem, your opponents are going to remove it, right? And when are they going to remove it? Well, they're not silly. They're gonna remove it when you can't fling it in response, which means with Sunscorched Regent, even 1 turn cycle, Sunscorched Regent's at 8/7. Can you fling something else? I would argue no, because the second you fling something else, someone's going to destroy the Sunscorched Regent, and then that 5 mana and waiting a turn was wasted. So instead, you should be sacrificing it as soon as it gets to a reasonable level. So this is 5 mana, hopefully to do 8 damage. I don't like it. It's so clunky. I think like on paper, it looks really good, but when you play with it, you're going to be unhappy with the results. It's just going to be too distracting on your side of the board to really deal with. So I think that's a really, really easy cut. Plarg and Nasari. Also really, really weird. I think this is almost the exact same thing as Atali, right? We've got a 5 mana creature we don't want to cast. We also, we don't want to fling. Now, we don't have an attack trigger, we have an upkeep trigger, so you can at least fling it after you get an upkeep trigger. But this is interesting, because this means you can't even use like your Kiki-Jikis, your Feldon of the Third Paths, these kind of your Cursed Mirrors to get extra copies out of it, right? Like, you're kind of stuck with this ability as a 5 mana exile, like cast 2 spells from your opponent's 2 of the okay, hold on, sorry, I had to keep reading this. So each player exiles a card, then one of your opponents chooses one you can't have, and then you can get 2 of the other ones. This is such a clunky card. Okay, no, don't play this. I'm reading this and it's upsetting me. Don't play this card. I really like the art of it. I really like them working together, but don't play this card. It almost would take too much work to explain how bad it is. All right, let's move on. Kiki-Jiki is great here. One of the problems, though, is there are a lot of legendaries that we are cutting some of them. But the less legendaries we have, the happier we are. But especially Kiki-Jiki with like Conquering Manticore or Zealous Conscripts. Well, Zealous Conscripts obviously is great because it's an infinite combo. Yeah, I needed to check that. Conquering Manticore can only steal your opponent's creatures. That's very noteworthy, because this means Conquering Manticore can't untap your own Brion, right? Because with Zealous Conscripts, you can gain control, quote unquote, of your own commander just to untap it, which is not nothing. So you can't do that with Conquering Manticore. But that also means that Zealous Conscript and Kiki-Jiki are an infinite combo, where you make infinite copies of Zealous Conscripts. So I really like them together. Kiki-Jiki is really strong here. Absolutely keep it. Huffrey Ghostforge is interesting. It's just really clunky. It's like 5 mana to do this. Okay, so it's 5 mana, And it basically is an aristocrat's commander where whenever your creatures die, you get a copy of it. I don't know. I'm going to say keep it for now. I feel like 5 mana is so much mana for this ability in a deck that's just really loaded up on high mana. I don't like it, but like I would say definitely play with it some, because it might be just really worth it and really good. So I'm just going to move on from there. Traxos, I don't, it's 7 power for a 4/4. I don't know if I'm missing something. This is too little power for 4 mana. So I think this is just easily cut. It is also at 4 mana with our commander. Otherian, that makes a copy, and then I think this is fine. This is like an extra copy of Kiki Jiki. I think this is good. I do like that there's like, it has its own ultimate. It's a bit clunky because it doesn't do anything until you activate it, but it's fine. I think it's fine. Captivating Crew, also fine to steal creatures. War Elemental feels clunky. I don't really like it. You need to deal damage to summon it, and to reanimate it, you need damage to have been dealt. And then it grows, albeit very quickly, but it does grow kind of clunkily, and it's still a 1/1 during that time. I don't know. I personally don't like it. I wouldn't play this. I'll have a better suggestion for it instead. And then the rest of the creatures are good. Let's go really quickly for the rest. I said I would take more time to talk about Insurrection. I'm not going to say too much more. I think it obviously fits in your theme and is really strong. I think this is a really clean finisher and should be the highest mana card in your deck. Looking at the rest of this here, I really like how many of these are just steal your opponent's creatures. I think Pirate's Pillage could be... There's a 3 mana version of this at sorcery speed, just so we can avoid more 4 mana cards with our commander. I think that's a really easy switch. And then looking at our instants, I'm mainly happy. Grab the Reins. I don't... Oh, because it has Fling on it. Okay, Grab the Reins is fine. I forgot that it has the Fling aspect to it. Big Score and Unexpected Windfall are really good cards, so I find it very difficult to say no to them, even though they are 4 mana, so I think that's fine. Active Aggression is fine because it's technically 3 mana. I like, so your instants are really nice. Your artifacts. So Expedition Map, you already have Wayfarer's Bauble, you have too few lands, you don't have any lands that I see that you desperately want to play. So I don't like Expedition Map. That should just be a land instead. You'll be a lot happier. Skull Clamp, I think, is fine. A lot of these, I think, are really good. Norn's Wellspring, I think, is too clunky. Think about it in the sense that you have to throw 2 creatures and then have an additional mana to draw a card. This is not how this card wants to work. You want to be using this in a very, like an Aristocrats deck that's a lot more about destroying a bunch of tokens. So you want to be able to use this every turn. Whereas Brion, you can really only use once a turn unless you have a very good combination of cards. So I think Norn's Wellspring is an easy cut. Let's see. The rest of these are fine. Hammer of Perforos, if you're just playing it for the haste, I think you have better options, but still, I don't like this. This card is really good in very niche situations, and I don't think this is it. Especially considering that the sacrifice a land to create a 3/3 with so few lands is just not really where you want to be. I think you could just play Fervor, or I believe there's another one at 3 mana in red that you could just play for haste if you want that another haste enabler. And one of the benefits of this is just vulnerable to so much hate, being an artifact and an enchantment. And I think you'll just be happier just having an enchantment that does this. Or just getting rid of it with Swiftfoot Booth, Lightning Greaves, Mass Hysteria. I think you already have enough of... I think you have enough haste enablers. Mimic Vat, I think, is okay. I don't really like it here. Mimic Vat is a card that feels strong, but like rarely is strong. I like that it's like soft hate against certain decks. That's neat. I just don't... It's so much mana to activate. 3 mana to activate, and you might just be getting a half-decent card. But like if you can get Conquering Manticore under it, like yeah, that's insanely... Wait, does it have to be 3 power? No, right? It's any creature. Yeah, so it's really strong, but like you have to set it up really well. I'm going to say keep it for now, but I think it's a clunky card myself. So moving on. Death Render, I think, is just a little too clunky here. It's 4 mana. It doesn't. You have to pay 4 mana and doesn't do anything until a creature dies. No, sorry. 4 mana doesn't do anything. You have to equip it to a creature. Then that creature has to die. And then you get another creature from your hand. I think this is really strong when you only have creatures you want to cheat into play. But as we're cutting them out, and I think we should be cutting them out, I think Deathrender loses a lot of power and should be cut. Phyrexian Processor is really hard for me to say no to because I understand why this card is really, really good. You can pay like 3/4 of your health, and then every turn you get to fling and gain that life back for 5 mana, basically. The thing is, it's just so clunky. And I think the odds of, because like, honestly, I would play this at 9 mana, right? 4 mana, cast it, pay the life, immediately activate it, hope that Brion isn't destroyed in the process, and then immediately fling that minion at one of your opponents. So a lot of things have to go right for this to be strong. So that's kind of why I don't like it. The ceiling is absurdly high, but the floor isn't great. If you cast this early game at like 4 mana and you pay half your life, I will destroy it, right? I will generous gift it. I will, putrefy it. I don't know. I'll use some kind of destroy spell on it, beast within it, and then you're going to feel really, really bad. And I don't want that to happen to you. Like playing this and it gets natured claimed, and like I guess you get 4 life back, but it just feels really, really bad. So I think this is too high risk reward, especially when you do need 9 mana. I think, in order to be playing this safely. And even with 9 mana, there's still a moment while you're activating this card that you're vulnerable to losing your commander. And that to me is just too much of a risk. So I don't love it myself. And then looking at enchantments, I like it. Sneak Attack, I think, is still worth playing, even if we don't have the high mana stuff. Okay, so all of those are my, how are we doing on time? All of those are my kind of points that I think are the weaker parts of the deck. I think generally it is the high mana curve that's holding it back. And I think if we cut down on the mana curve, you're going to be having a much better time. So let's go into my additions. And what I'm going to say for my additions, I'm going to put the easy ones to the back, actually. And I'm going to say a lot of my additions are based off of this card, Phyrexian Dreadnought. Phyrexian Dreadnought, of course, being a 1 mana 12/12 that is nearly unplayable in your deck other than to be flung. And I like that. I like that a lot. I want to suggest a few more cards like this. And I know you said no tutors, and I haven't added any tutors, but it's something worth considering that the power level of these cards are really, really high. And I think it is worth considering that if you ever do think of tutors or other ways to kind of put cards in your graveyard, putting these cards, the majority of which are artifacts, into your graveyard is going to be really, really powerful for the deck once we get to Reanimation. But so Phyrexian Dreadnought is good. So my next suggestion is Lupin Prototype. First of all, this card is awesome, just in flavor. This is the great. A wolf mech is the funniest, greatest thing I've ever seen in my life. It is 5 power for 2 mana, so the rate is the best you'll get for 2 power at this in these colors, and it is really, really good. You just play it for 5 and then you fling it. Really, really easy, and then it's really easy to reanimate to get more flings. I think this is fine. 5 is an eighth of someone's deck. No, it should be more, right? It's not. What times? 5 times 8. That's not how. That's not how that works. So it is an eighth of a deck, which is higher than 10%. Sorry, I got myself confused. So it is just a little more than 10%. It's probably like 12 or something. It's a little more than 10% of someone's life. So it's not crazy good, but it is good if you can repeat it. The problem is this one can never attack. So of the ones I'm going to suggest, this one is the weakest. But there's specifically one card that works with it really well at it being 2 mana. So I do kind of like it. And I do like, unlike the other options, this can just kind of stay on the battlefield. The other options have like a lifespan, much like how our Phyrexian Dreadnought has a lifespan. So this is the only one that doesn't. So there is some benefit to it despite the low power. So the one I wanted to suggest at 3 mana is Phyrexian Soul Gorger. Now this is meant to be very much so I believe, a reference to this card in how it works. It's like sacrifices creatures and gets out of hand really, really quickly. But once again, you don't have to do that. You can just fling this. And since since 5 damage is an eighth, one can surmise that 8 damage is a fifth of someone's health. 8 damage is around the number that I really, really like. It does have a bit, and its sacrifice clause is on the next upkeep. So the way I like playing this is with your haste enabler, you play the Soul Gorger, you attack with the Soul Gorger, it gets chomped, whatever, you get a hit in, ideally, and then you immediately fling it. So if you can haste this into an opponent and then fling it into the same opponent, you have done 16 damage to them, which is almost half their life. And I really, really like that. So I think at that point, it is incredibly, incredibly strong and incredibly easy to bring back from the graveyard. So already I do like this. And there is a universe that you could leave it around 1 turn, because sacrificing just the first creature isn't too bad. But on the second turn where you have to sacrifice 2 creatures, I think that's going a little too far. So with that in mind, I do particularly like this setup, and I think this is a really easy inclusion. And then the last one at 3 mana is Ball Lightning. I think this one is also an easy inclusion. This one's a little trickier though, because you got to use this carefully. This is one that is only good at attacking opponents that do not have any blockers. Otherwise, you're just flinging this, because in order for this to do damage to an opponent, it has to take damage, and the second it takes damage, it dies immediately. It has 1 health. So this one's harder to keep around, but 6 damage for 3 mana is very, very reasonable. And the ceiling is quite high, where you hit someone for 6, and then you fling it, immediately getting 12 damage, which once again, that's more than a quarter of their health. So I really like that. Now, I have 2 other creatures I want to suggest that can be fodder, and they're just kind of utility creatures in your colors, and that's Loyal Warhound and Knight of the White Orchid. These are both just incredibly strong 2-mana white creatures that both have the same clause that, if an opponent controls more lands than you, you are going to put a plains onto the battlefield. And this one has tapped, Knight of White Orchid doesn't, but either way, you're really, really happy with this effect. They have different bodies, a 2/2 first strike, 3/1 vigilance, but in the end, they're both going to get flung, so you don't mind too much. Speaking of flinging, you're not playing Fling. Fling is the point of your commander, so having at least 1 copy, and another one here with Kazul's Fury, which is a land on the other side, so I do really like that. But both of these are just flings at 2 and 3 mana each. There's just going to be situations where you've set up a fling, but your commander is not able to fling. Use this instead. It is something you can do with your commander gone, and both of these have the benefit of being actually fling, which says power to any target. So you can use both of these as removal, which I think is rather, rather good. I also absolutely love this art. It's so captivating, just like the bravery of it. Oh, excuse me. Oh, excuse me. Thank you. Thank you, phone app. I'm still getting used to, oops, not that one. I'm still getting used to all of these devices that my computer has. All right, so let us see. Let us see what we can go from here. Right, so we've got this fling. And what we want next is we want another card that's just more akin to our commander. And so what we're going to use here is Surtland Flinger. This is a giant berserker, 4/6. When it attacks, sacrifice another creature. When you do, it's flung. And if it's a giant, it's double flung. Now, what I really like about this is though you can't use it as an activated ability, you can start flinging extra creatures per turn. And because like how haste works and on attack, we just have a lot of good attacks we can do. This works really well with Kiki Jiki. This works really well with haste enablers, and there's a lot of fun things we can do with it. But the other thing I like about it, well, besides the fact that it's 5 mana, and so it doesn't coincide with our commander, is that once again, it's any target. And so you can use this to get more profitable attacks, even with the Flinger itself, but in general. And the fact that this does double damage if you fling a giant, is really interesting because it allows you to go further into giants if you want. But once again, it's just really, really strong with like Kiki effects or anything else where you can fling like copies of itself or copies of other giants and get a lot of damage. So this is your other copy that I think is very, very much so worth playing. All right, let's look at the final inclusions that I would like to bring up, and these are Reanimation. Now, when you said Reanimation, you weren't specific. I don't know if you wanted to reanimate your Ulamogs, which makes sense because it's a very strong card, but what I want to reanimate is those really, really strong low mana cards. Lupin Prototype, Phyrexian Dreadnought, Phyrexian Soul Gorger, and Ball Lightning. So I am including cards that reanimate those cards because you want to be flinging those same really strong cards over and over again. They are the strongest. And we want to keep the mana low. So Helping a Hand will reanimate any of those 3 mana or less cards, and they'll come in tapped and you fling them. Recommission will reanimate any of those 3 mana cards back, and it will come in with an additional +1/+1 counter, and then you will fling them for an additional damage. Return Triumphant. Unfortunately, this one, it will reanimate any 3 mana or less. You'll need an attack to give it +1/+1, but its toughness is not going to be 3 or less. I guess Ball Lightning is the exception for this. Like Return Triumphant works with Ball Lightning, but otherwise you're just casting it to reanimate a 3 mana or less creature. Extraction Specialist reanimates a 2 mana or less creature. Namely, I think this works best with the Dreadnought. So you can reanimate it, sacrifice, immediately use it for fling it to do 12 damage. And then later you can sacrifice the Extraction Specialist as well. So I do really, really like it. And then you can do really silly stuff like using Helping Hand to bring back the Extraction Specialist, which then brings back like Lupin Prototype or the Dreadnought, or even things like the Loyal Warhound for value. So I really do like this one as an inclusion, but it does only hit 2 or less. And then finally, we have Patch Up. Patch Up reanimates up to 3 creatures with total mana value 3 or less. And what I really, really like about this is if you have Dreadnought and like Lupin Prototype, you get both. Most of the time, you're probably going to get a single creature out of this, but the idea of being able to get several is really, really good. I don't think your deck is really built to get 3 1/1s because I believe you only have the 2. Yeah. So I think this is just reanimate 2 creatures for 3 mana, which is really, really good. And the last card that I'm going to show is the Calamity Bearer. And Calamity Bearer is just kind of a bonus card. I didn't really want to put it in. I had ideas about it, but if you go more into giants, this is definitely a kind of thing. But the whole idea is this just doubles the damage of your giants, which you have quite a few giants. You could have more, but of course, the main idea is this doubles the damage of your commander. And what I like is it also works really well with the Illusionist Bracers, so you get to basically hit twice for double damage if you have this equipped as well. And I think that's a really, really good combination. So that would be just a bonus card that you can put in that I think would be fun. But overall, those are my thoughts on the deck. I think it's got a direction that it's going into. I think we have to fix up the mana, but otherwise, after we do, it's going to play a lot smoother, and then we can re-examine things like the cheat into play aspects or reanimating other parts of the deck, such as reanimating like Ulamogs and throwing them and things like that. Those are things that we can get into, but at the moment, that's not where we're at. I just had a thought and it's gone now, but that's okay. Thank you so much for sending the deck. I really like the idea of it, and I'm really excited to see where it goes. If you'd like to send me another draft of the deck, there is a link in the video description down below. And if you'd like that draft to be one of the 2 decks I work on every time I work on decks, well, there's a link for that as well. And finally, like, comment, subscribe, YouTube thing, you know where it's at. You'll do great. Thank you so much, Earth, Weeb, and Fire. I absolutely love that name. And thank you for sending the deck, and I'm excited to see what you do with it. Good luck.